Hello, my name is Ashnod. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. And today I will be delving into The Brothers' War by Jeff Grubb to summarize the book for those who, for whatever reason, have not read or do not feel inclined to reread the entire book. Our story begins as the main characters, the brothers Urza and Mishra, arrive at the camp of an elderly archaeologist named Tokasia. They are children of a noble that have basically been outcast from their family Cinderella style since their stepmom hates them. This is where the cards Tokasia's Welcome and Tokasia Digsite Mentor occur in our timeline. Mishra and Urza are like 10 years old here, so they do not appear on cards. But notably, in the art of Tokasia's Welcome, Urza and Mishra do appear. Technically, but they're depicted to be way older than they're supposed to be for the time of the book where the card art is supposed to happen. So my theory is that the card art was from a different card originally and put onto the Tokasia's Welcome card. That's what I think happened. The first thing that the boys do when they get into camp is get into a fight with another boy named Ricklao, who Urza claims was picking on Mishra, his younger brother. This eventually is resolved by Tokasia, who takes Ricklao's side and determines that, in fact, Mishra shouldn't have been messing around with Ricklao's stuff. Tokasia takes the boys aside, Urza and Mishra, to her little tent office on top of the hill that the encampment is built in. It scolds them, basically, for getting into a fight within their first 20 minutes of arriving in the camp, and explains to them how being in the camp will work and how they'll have to get along with Ricklao, and sends them away after assigning them to kitchen duty with Ricklao for a while. We can tell the brothers apart in personality even by this point in the first chapter. Mishra is more ill-tempered and fiery, whereas Urza is more calm and collected, except when it comes to arguing with his little brother. In which case he becomes just as fiery and passionate as anyone else, especially as fiery and passionate as Mishra. They're very alike in that way. Also, the boys, during an argument in Tokasia's office and during this chapter, somehow magically fuse a broken power stone together through the power of arguing with each other, and they refill the stone with mana. This is never explained or referenced again in the history of Magic the Gathering, but I've determined that you get to know about it because it has bothered me since I first read the book. Chapter 2 is called Ornithopter. 6 summers pass and Urza and Mishra are not sent home on the caravan they came in on, thankfully for them, I guess. In fact, they become permanent members of the camp, like Tokasia herself. During this 6-year time skip, Urza and Mishra's dad dies, and they become quite sad about that. And they have nowhere else to really go, so the camp truly becomes like a home to them, and Tokasia kind of becomes a surrogate mother or grandmother. This is where we get our first Urza and Mishra cards. They come in the form of Urza Power Stone Prodigy and Mishra Excavation Prodigy. Both boys' titles reflect their function in the camp accurately. Urza, by this time, is sort of a recluse. He doesn't like dealing with other people. He likes to be alone and research stuff and spend time with machines, which is a trend that will continue for his entire life. And rather than, spend time with others, he spends time with machines. He spends time studying by himself. But on the other hand, Mishra is very good with people, and he likes to get down and dirty and get in the dig sites with the rest of the camp members and the diggers that are hired, Falaji. The two brothers are thought to be two halves of the same being by Tokasia. But during these 6 summers, evidently they grow and become this recluse and this people person. After these 6 years of being in the camp, Lauren, a minor noble girl, returns to the camp. She apparently had been a former student, and she's there to survey the camp's successes and see how things are. Basically, she's there to judge the camp on whether it needs more funding from the nobles of Pendragon. To show Lauren how epic and awesome the camp is, Tokasia takes her to this machine that they've been rebuilding that they found in the ground a long time ago. That machine is an ornithopter, a flying machine that was created 5,000 years ago by the Thran Empire. They finally complete the ornithopter, the reconstructed thopter, if you will, and Mishra and Urza both want to fly the thing, because who doesn't want to fly a helicopter? They argue for a bit, and decide that it's each other's turn at the same time, very comically, which gets them nowhere, of course, so they end up flipping a coin to determine who gets to fly it first. Mishra loses, and so Urza gets to fly the craft first. This is where the story spotlight card Take Flight occurs, I believe. But it could happen during any flight of the ornithopter. Urza flies the craft up into the sky successfully and lands it just fine, but Mishra, when he gets his turn, decides that it's trick flying time and basically just goes ballistic and bounces off the walls with the ornithopter. He flies really high, though, and he sees engravings in the ground of the desert that you would only be able to see from the air. And they are of minotaurs and elves and stuff. It's like art in the desert. Urza, of course, did not notice these markings because he was busy being a worrywart and staying close to the ground. But as children do, he pretends he did in fact see the markings. Mishra is adamant that they investigate the origin of these markings in the desert, and so they eventually do. And they find that wherever these markings can be found in the desert, there are Thran leftovers on the ground and under the ground. The brothers now are regularly arguing about who the Thran were. Eventually, though, they discuss the topic a final time and get very close to the real answer. Urza surmises that something must have swept through the Thran civilization and erased any trace of their bodies. This something must have been a plague, of course, and this is a pretty close guess. Mishra, on the other hand, surmises that the Thran must have been destroyed in a cataclysmic war that left nothing of their bodies for future scavengers to find. This is actually more correct than Urza's guess. The Thran, in reality, were wiped out by mana bombs dropped during a civil war, during which an engineered plague did sweep through the Empire. So both brothers are approximately correct when you combine their answers. During this same dinner conversation, Urza proposes that the markings that they found in the desert are, in fact, a map left by the Thran that points towards a great settlement at the center. All of the markings you see were in an arc on the edge of a circle, and the center point of that circle, Urza argues, must be something important if all the lines in the desert originate from it. Mishra, at first, does not believe his brother, but after Urza sketches out the arc that they found in the desert on a map of the area, and after Urza threatens to go to the center of the circle alone, Mishra and Tokasia are finally convinced that they should go along with him. So they take off in the ornithopter. They fly for an entire day across the desert in the ornithopter, take a rest overnight on a mountaintop, and then fly for another partial day before finding what is the greatest discovery they've found so far in the camp. They find the ruins of Halcyon, the capital of the Thran Empire. Well, the former capital. So Chapter 3, Koilos, occurs, and together the brothers and Tokasia arrive in the ruins of Halcyon. Once the city had been suspended in the air by powerful artifice and magic, but now, as we can see in the flavor text of Ancient Den, it now lies in ruins on the desert floor. After a small encounter with a rock, which is a giant bird, the trio find themselves within what were once the Caves of the Damned. Basically, this is where the Thran put all of their unsightly people, all of their sick people, all of their criminals. It was truly not a very good place. Here in the Caves of the Damned, the trio find many old yet still functioning machines left by the Thran Empire. The lights still work, and it's as if the Thran never left, basically. It's super clean, and looks like it hasn't been touched. Eventually, the trio find themselves in the final room of the Book of the Thran, which is to say that they meet up basically in the room that the last scene of the Thran takes place in. This is the final resting place of Glacian Power Stone Engineer and Rebek Architect of Ascension. They gaze upon a complete Power Stone unlike any they've ever seen before, and this Power Stone isn't broken at all. It's not the same color as the other ones they've seen before either. The other ones they've seen have been white. This one is like pulsing different colors, like green and red. This Power Stone, unbeknownst to the trio, was the one that Yawgmoth used to capture the spark of Glacian, and that Rebek, his wife, used to seal the portal to Phyrexia that they are standing directly next to, locking Phyrexians out of Dominaria. Once they are fully in this room, they begin inspecting the brand new looking machinery that has been utterly untouched by the world since the end of the Thran Civil War 5,000 years earlier. Unfortunately, though, one of the brothers touched a metal book in the middle of the room near the Power Stone, and, to quote the book, quote, Tokasia could not tell which brother was responsible for what happened next. She could not tell which brother had touched the particular glyph, or even if either did. Later, neither brother admitted to anything, and each accused the other of causing the disaster. All Tokasia could say was that as Urza reached out to stop his brother, the glow of the Power Stone intensified, suddenly and hotly. There was an explosion, but one without sound, and the huge Power Stone, the heart of the secret heart, shattered in a blossom of light. End quote. So, this event is what is depicted on the Story Spotlight card, splitting the Power Stone. And this single mistake shapes the entire history of the Plane of Dominaria henceforth. Chapter 4 is Visions, and after the explosion of the Power Stone, both brothers are momentarily knocked out cold. The brothers both experience a vision of Phyrexia. The dreams the brothers experience are both very weird. Urza sees floating metal gears that are carrying priests and robot spiders to basically a big mine or a big furnace that they're all like jumping into and being poured into. Whereas Mishra sees a clone of himself, though Phyrexianized. Eventually, this clone of Mishra begins moving on its own, and though he doesn't know it yet, it takes the shape of Gix, who is a Phyrexian praetor. We can actually see both of these dreams represented on the card, Visions of Phyrexia. The left side of the card represents Urza's dream of Phyrexia, including the gear and the priests. On the right side, we can see Mishra's dream represented in a more abstract way, where we just see the horror of Phyrexia represented by figures carrying or perhaps speared by the symbol of Phyrexia. This, to me, is probably because Mishra experiences visions of Phyrexia from this point through the entire rest of the book, and Urza doesn't experience them after this point. From this point on, Mishra seems to have an unexplained connection to Phyrexia, to the point where his dreams constantly have him, like, scared of Phyrexia, because he's sort of spirit-walking to Phyrexia. Because when he has this vision of Phyrexia, Gix can actually see him for real and sense him. So it's not just a vision. There's something more going on that isn't explained. Quickly, though, both brothers end up waking up on the floor of the room with their respective halves of the Power Stone in hand. After the explosion, the robotic guards of the Caves of the Damned animate for the first time in a bajillion years, and the three are chased from Koilos entirely. They do discover, however, that the two now unique Power Stones that they possess have magic powers, and that they can fire lasers, and that they can will them to do stuff. On the chase out of Koilos, Mishra and Urza both fire a laser from their Power Stone at a robot. Urza's Power Stone, what he begins to call the Might Stone, makes the attacking robot stronger. This seriously almost gets them killed until Mishra uses his own stone on the robot, and the stone causes the robot to virtually fall to pieces before their eyes. Mishra's stone becomes known as the Weak Stone because it weakens this robot. And that's the whole reason. This is the card, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. Disaster strikes, though, when the sibling rivalry between Urza and Mishra begins at this point, as Urza accidentally, in quotes, hits Mishra in the face with his half of the Power Stone during an argument after escaping the robots guarding the Caves of the Damned. This is the event depicted on Overwhelming Remorse, or at least the card art shows the aftermath of Urza punching his brother in the head with the rock. This card is one of the first it's actually the second, technically, discrepancy we find between the book and the story spotlights, as the flavor text seems to indicate that this card is referring to a different event, but the card art is very clearly referring to the events at Koilos because of the desert stuff, the sandstone, the fact that there is a taller adult shadow and a shorter, more childlike shadow watching Mishra run away. Nonetheless, though, despite the apologies from his brothers, Mishra grows to resent his older brother very fast after this hitting him in the face, action, which is kind of fair. I would be very upset with my sibling if my sibling smacked me in the face with a rock and was being an asshat to me. So, whether this resentment is Mishra's own or an effect that the Power Stone had on him, though, is unclear to me. He and Urza supposedly always used to talk out arguments before these events, but now Mishra refuses to talk it out with Urza and just becomes petulant and angry. Both brothers go from talking things out and just coming to understandings to being angry with each other, and they refuse to talk and they refuse to cooperate. Eventually, the trio return to the base camp, and basically they decide that people shouldn't go to Koilos anymore. It's dangerous, which is true, very true. Chapter 5 is Sundering, and to quote the text, "The world changed after Koilos and became a darker place in the months that followed. Urza becomes a total recluse, basically, and Mishra just generally becomes angry, like he has something to prove to everyone as well. And so he starts overworking the diggers and things like that. Each brother also develops a strange obsession with the Power Stone halves that the other brother possesses, with each wanting to get the other stone and trying to get their surrogate mom, Tokaja, to get them to hand over the other half of the stone to them so that they could have both halves. This creepy rock obsession drives both brothers to be pretty unlikable by those around them for the most part, while they're in camp, as they're really, really obsessed with getting a hold of these stones. My theory is that since these stones are both halves of a Planeswalker spark, they long to be together, and that affects the wielders of the stones adversely, since we know that the stones can create a telepathic connection to their wielder, because Mishra's stone sings to him, and speaks to him, according to Mishra at least. And so, eventually, one night, of course, Mishra gets drunk with his buddy Hajar, and the two devise a plan to basically go beat up Urza for his half of the Power Stone. Urza does not enjoy this plan, and of course, they get into an argument when Mishra tries to have, Urza beat up. This is where Brothershood End happens. The brothers devolve into firing laser beams at each other during this argument from their stones. And though in the book this scene takes place indoors in a bedroom, it's still accurate what happens on the card. When Tokaja then, steps in between them to stop the fight, like you would normally to stop a fight, the laser beams hit her and they end up killing her. This is the event depicted on Brotherhood's End, like I said. They cause a huge explosion which blows up the building that they're in, killing Tokaja, and Mishra runs away into the dead of night, and he's never seen again. Because Tokaja was the only reason that the camp existed, it dissolves, and Urza finds himself having to navigate the world entirely alone. And that is the first quarter of the Brothers War book.